Welcome to a football show, week 1, Monday edition. That is Paul Kuharsky. I'm Braden Gall. We are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. You can jump into the comment section if you want. You can give us a thumbs up on YouTube. And, of course, you can retweet and share on Facebook and Twitter as well if you want to. And we've got plenty of stuff to get to. Plenty of stuff, Paul, that'll make you drink. So if you need a beverage, Sinkers Beverages is your place. How were the travels, Paul? Welcome home.
Very nice trip. Got to see the Yankees. It was cold. It was warm in the sun. It was cold in the shade, and we were against the chain link fence at the very back row, so the wind was blowing through us. But saw a nice win for the Yanks. It's always nice to be at Wrigley. Had a good dinner with some friends, old and new, and lovely weekend in Chicago overall. I don't have a rooting interest in that Titans game, so it made it a lot more palatable.
Yes, I imagine. And make sure you check out, of course, Paul Kuharsky's YouTube page every single Sunday following games. You, of course, had a lot of folks tune in and a lot of people that we're going to try to talk off the ledge or not. Maybe we make you jump today. I'm not sure. So we'll have a lot to discuss because, honestly, the question is in week 1 of all football, almost every level, you got to try to figure out what's real and you got to figure out what's not. And so what we saw on Sunday at Soldier Field, some of that stuff that's going to carry through the entire season that they're going to have to deal with, the Titans, over the course of the whole year. Some of it's going to be just this is week 1. And sometimes one data point is not enough to actually know what somebody is. So what's real and what's not. How much we'll play the blame game, of course, as well, because Will Levis is taking a lot of it. But I don't think he's the only reason they lost that football game. There's plenty of other reasons. So we'll discuss special teams and the offensive line not protecting the quarterback and maybe the scheme as well. But that's where I'm going to start, Paul, because we spent a lot of time on this show and on your show and in your writings talking about how much new this is, the changeover in the organization. New. Everything's new scheme, new focus, new culture, new attitude, so many new players, new front office, new analytics department, new stretching and conditioning, new strength and conditioning, everything. And what we had was a quarterback who made some questionable decisions. We had an offensive scheme that didn't look particularly inspiring. We had an offensive line that couldn't protect the quarterback. We had special teams that made major mistake after major mistake. We had an offense that ran the football and a defense that played pretty well, and a bad loss. That all sounds like the old Titans, Paul. And so the more things change, the more things stay the same, at least after 1 week.
Very, very familiar looking Titans effort, a very bad version of a very familiar Titans effort. Again, 5.9% of the season. Week 1 is a liar a lot of times. Titans are 3-7, I believe, now in their last 10 openers, and the openers very often not been reflective of what the Titans turn out to be. So you can take encouragement from that all you want. But for all of the change that you just listed and that we've spent months talking about, very little of it was tangible on Soldier Field on Sunday, and that's a huge disappointment. And I thought it started right from the get-go on offense, where 2 3-and-outs. You had 2 handoffs on first down, and I thought a chance to come out. Callahan talked today in his Monday press conference about wanting to ease in some of the young guys. And I thought he should have gone in there and bashed them over the head with something early and tried to dictate and establish and all of that. And instead, the Titans eased in with their new offensive coordinator who said there's scheme for everything. And his scheme for everything was to ease in. And I thought the first two offensive drives were very telling, and they looked just like Tim Kelly and Todd Downing.
It's funny. I had my youngest had 2 soccer matches like up near like Pleasant View, like out kind of towards Clarksville, and we were listening to the radio broadcast on the way up because we had to leave right at like noon to get there. And I think even at one point, Coach Mack was like, "Yeah, those are 2 pretty bad series to start the season." Like even Coach Mack is just like, "Yeah, that wasn't very good." And it's short passing game and inability to block. There are some positives. I do think there are a couple of small positives, but not a lot. To be taken away from the first half. And so ultimately, I want to ask you sort of about the 24-hour thing here. We're now about, we're 24 hours about roughly from the end of the game. And when Brian Callahan sat down with you guys at Soldier Field and had the press conference in the post game, he's come back and had one now. Has anything changed in your mind? The immediate reaction, sometimes you need to take a breath sometimes and kind of reevaluate. Coaches do that with tape. Has anything changed for you in terms of how you evaluated the game immediately after your column and now 24 hours later?
Well, I think the most interesting thing that he said was this kind of some guys have regressed in things that he was surprised by. And that's great candor by him, but it also says maybe the job's a little bigger than he imagined with things like, the headliner is Levis's interception near the end, where he said about the third quarter timeout, he said to Levis, the defense is coasting here. The defense is going to win us this game. All we have to do is not make a big mistake. All we have to do is not give them a reason to win the game. And Levis, against that advice, which should have been front of brain based on that conversation that his coach had. I think Callahan had some big deficiencies in this game, but that's not one. He knows exactly how that game's unfolding. He knows exactly what's going to win or lose the game at that point. And he tells his quarterback exactly that. And his quarterback, who's been coached throughout the preseason and camp to master the mundane, to be satisfied with short passes when there might be longer opportunities that are lower percentage and all of that stuff, defaults to this thing where he can save 6 yards instead of being sacked by flicking a ball out of bounds, and makes as stupid a play as you'll see. And it's the biggest, chip in an incredibly bad loss. And so that to Callahan was a regression. I went, he said some of these things need to happen in the game in order to have that kind of meaning. I said, well, you'd seen the over aggressive running without sliding in a game, and you've beaten that home with him, and he's still doing it in the game. Does that worry you that some of these things aren't going to translate? And he said, listen, some of these things, you've had a lot of you guys have kids, you got to say it and say it and say it and say it. And finally it'll click in. And, hopefully not all of them are like the running thing, but we had the running thing with Joe Burrow for a long time before he realized this is not a practical thing for me that's going to help keep me healthy. And it clicked in, and now he doesn't do it. But there's no reason for Will Levis to jump into contact after he's passed the first down marker when a slide is completely sufficient, and he's said so. He says he gets it, and then he still doesn't do it.
That play was so fascinating because I think I could actually see his brain going, well, if I slide now, it's short. And so then once, you know what I'm saying? Like you could see that he was like, no, I got to make sure I get across. But then once you're across, you got to make some business decisions.
And he also, he's looking to energize his team and lead. And so there is a line to walk there. And look, I'm not excited about the conservative, be smart thing in a lot of situations. But then when he's not conservative and isn't smart, it's a death blow.
I thought the word surprising was an interesting term from Brian Callahan.
Yeah.
That is to your point, it's candid and it's honest, but it's certainly a concern when. And again, we don't need to belabor the interception here. Like everybody knows who's ever watched a football game that you can't make that decision on first down. You can't make that on any down or in any quarter. And you certainly can't make it when you're up by 1 with 7 minutes to go in the game at around midfield when you're going to punt the ball to an offense that's done largely nothing. I think you said this on your show. I think it's TD's stat. Is it the first time in NFL history that a team has been down 17-0 and won the game with less than 150 yards of offense? Is that the right number?
Yeah. I mean, that's just a miserable thing to hang on your stat wall.
Your NFL debut as a coach. So I do think there's a lesson in here though, because Kiki says, look, I'm very, very concerned about Callahan, the play caller. We'll get to that. And then goes on to say, as of 9/6/24, it's very hard to see Callahan as the head coach when the new stadium opens up. Let's take a deep breath. This is one football game. Will Levis has done all the bad things and now has to show us that he's coachable and that he can play those things out of his system like he's done. But again, Levis, there's not a lot to be said about him. The two big issues here with Will Levis are accuracy and processing. Those are the things that Brian Callahan said are most important in a quarterback. They're the things he said coming in as the head coach. They're the things he was asked about during the training of the offseason and training of Will Levis. And unfortunately, we did not really see either of those two things from the quarterback in week 1. There are 16 more tries at this. There's going to be good games and there's going to be some questionable games. But it's just one piece of data. But as of one piece of data, processing and accuracy, those two things didn't happen for the quarterback.
Processing was very bad. I mean, he looked uncomfortable from the very beginning. Even the short stuff that's supposed to be easy was not comfortable for him. He did make a couple throws, I think, that were, right in the right place on a guy's shoulder that turned him the right way or kept him safe away from a defender. But these are minor things in the big picture. Just too uncomfortable too often. And if the first thing, like the pre-programmed read Blake Bedingfield wrote, if that wasn't there, then there was all kinds of trouble for him. And it's really disconcerting. Look, I wrote a couple times during training camp, you wanted to see some big jump, and there wasn't a big jump. There was maybe steady progress that was incremental. And I think people really would have liked to have seen a big jump in the opener, and that certainly was not there either. Now, I think we can all say one game and all of that, but the Jets are going to be a very good defense too. We'll see just how good tonight. I hope Christian McCaffrey shreds them personally, but if the Jets come in here, and it's a tough situation for the Jets, short week, second travel trip after going 3 time zones. But I expect the Jets are going to be pretty stiff on defense, pretty stout on defense, and that's a different kind of challenge. I want to see better scheming. You've got to see better execution. The defense, as good as it was, needs to take the ball away, probably on top of what it's doing to set the offense up for some better scenarios. And it's got to be a lot better. And if they open 0-2, that's one thing. If they open 0-2 and they look poor again doing it, I think people will be bracing for some really bad stuff.
If the question is sort of what's real and what's not about Levis in particular, I do think it's a very real concern, or maybe just a real question that he has to answer, which he could do, which again is accuracy and processing. Those are the two things we've talked about. If you're saying is the pick six and the strip sack, and again, I'm going to rattle off this drive chart here, which is once they go up 17-0, 1 play 11 yards into the half, 6 play 8 yards block punt, 3 plays minus 7 yards punt, 3 plays 9 yards punt, 5 plays 3 yards fumble lost, 4 plays 15 yards pick six, 3 plays 5 yards punt. That's before the last drive that ends in an interception.
And the average was under 3 yards of play in the second half.
All of the extreme awfulness, Paul, is not necessarily real. That's the stuff that you like. You're not going to probably make those decisions and make those mistakes again. How bad it really was and I would argue for most of the game, you have to think that that's not necessarily real. I think it's fair though, and very real to say, look, until we see accuracy and processing, and you can remember, and this is the other thing, you have to remember, like, think about the throws. How many of them stand out to you as like going through all of that stuff the way Brian Callahan probably wants him to? The one that stands out to me is when he steps up in the pocket and he delivers a rope, which most quarterbacks cannot throw. He delivers, it's like a 22-yard on a rope, like no more than like 8 feet off the ground, it felt like, to Ridley, to your point, inside shoulder so he could turn and kind of fall forward. That is an extraordinary throw, and I can't think of any other ones.
I think the touchdown throw to Chigg's being very credited to Chigg, who made a great catch on it, but it was the kind of ball that only Chigg was going to make a great catch on, or it was going to be nothing. So I'm going to give him credit on that throw. I think that was a pretty good play. But yeah, beyond that, there's nothing in the passing game to be particularly excited about.
So Callahan talked about Spears and Pollard. We'll get to that in just a second. We'll talk about the scheme as well, and we'll talk about the offensive line before we do. However, of course, Sinkers Beverages, PK. If you were in town and you were watching the game and you felt the need to get a beverage, I hope that you searched Uber Eats and had Sinkers deliver the booze directly to your house. That's the smart thing to do. They drive so you can drink. They also have some events planned. They got tastings on Fridays. They have allocation drops for you bourbon fans out there, a walk-in beer fridge, the 3-time liquor store of the year in Nashville, Tennessee. Locally owned and operated. Support good local business, so check them out. Sign up for the in-crowd. Give them a follow on the socials, and make sure if you're in the north side of town, make sure you check out Bluegrass Beverages. They have been serving the Hendersonville market for over 50 years. Best of Bluegrass is their rewards club. You can sign up for that as well. Again, you'll get sort of ahead of schedule drops, you'll know when good stuff is coming. And obviously, if you just need a good bottle of wine, I don't know anything about wine. I know a lot about bourbon. I don't know anything about wine. I go into Sinkers and they help me out. They take care of me. So check them out. Sinkers Beverages, Bluegrass Beverages, one-stop shop there for all your liquor store needs.
Let me jump on one thing that's in the comments here, if I may. Kiki's got Titans hold the record for most absolutely embarrassing records against. They certainly have some. But we hit points like this where the Titans do things like they did. We'll talk a little bit probably about the DNA characteristics that
we can go there now if you want.
Well, I do think there's a DNA characteristic for them. I mean, the building's turned over, multiple times since I've been covering this team in 1996 in Houston, Texas. And they have the capacity to produce games like this that are baffling and, incredible. They score 16 points at a world record rate, it feels like, though Zach has looked that up for us once, and it does not, in fact, prove to be true, though it certainly feels like it. And I think all of us who look at it with an objective eye understand what we're talking about here. But to Kiki's comment here, hold the record for most absolutely embarrassing records against, I just think people get too far removed from thinking about what the Browns have done historically, what the Jets have done historically, what the Lions have done historically, right? And so when you get caught up in the Titans' badness when they're bad, you have to remember these touchstones of these teams are truly awful, like years and years of Wisenhunt Titans level play. And while the Titans go through their phases, they are not that. They're consistently middling, too consistently middling, and their bombs can be something special, like it was yesterday. But they are not 20 years of Detroit Lions or Cleveland Browns or New York Jets. They are not.
I do think if you're going to describe their DNA over their entire existence, you do have to your point, you do have to say, look, there's a lot of middling there because there's plenty of decent seasons, plenty of playoff bids, and plenty of, especially at the running back position, plenty of things to cheer for. I'm just curious how because you have a long view of this organization. How do you quantify, like it almost defies logic that in a sport like the NFL, where it is designed with the bylaws to keep as much parity and balance as possible, like it's the most socialist sport we have in this country. How do you even quantify the DNA of an organization keeping it from finding success? Like I can understand it in college. Boosters make problems. They control purse strings. They decide things. I don't know how you do that other than like a bad owner in the NFL.
Well, I think it is a little bit Adam's family opposite of magic touch. But I just think that as the Titans franchise has been pushed into that 8-8, 7-9, 9-7, whatever it is now with 17 game schedule territory, which is where all of their stuff compacts to. They have a lot of seasons that are those records, or the good seasons are offset by the bad seasons, and it all smooshes into that general range. That their bad moments in that just are there's a particular aptitude for games that, if they're not quite as bad as yesterday, look like that. And it seems like every year there's one where you come away saying, how in the hell did they find a way to lose that game? Or how did they lose that game that way? How often is a punter's leg shredded? How often is, has a third string quarterback won? I mean, this team lost to Ryan Leaf. This team lost to Johnny Manziel. What franchise lost to both of those quarterbacks? I'm guessing none.
I think Leaf started like 5 games, I think, or something like that.
Yeah. So it's just stuff like that the Titans have a special knack for, it seems like. And I don't go to the extreme that some people go to. They say they can never win with the Adams family and ownership and all of that. But I do think there's something wound somewhere in the fabric of the DNA, in the soil where they've built their buildings, that it creates opportunity for things like happened on Sunday.
You're going very spiritual on me, PK. I don't know. It's like the Ford family, I feel like, has been in charge of the Lions for a long time. So, but now they're pretty good. So we'll see. All right. So,
right. But it won't last. I mean,
Sure.
after this Detroit era is gone, do we think that Detroit is going to become the Steelers or the Patriots or the 49ers? Or do we think that this is a glory era for Detroit and ultimately Detroit will be Detroit? I think ultimately Detroit will be Detroit.
I don't think, but honestly, there's no, like, it's all about, and this is a much deeper conversation, maybe for the offseason, but it is about good decision making. No franchise, no program, no team is immune from bad decision making. And if you hire bad people lead to bad seasons. And if you hire great people and surround yourself, giving agency to great decision makers and people that are good at their jobs, you can find success very quickly in the NFL. It's not like baseball or hockey or the NBA where it's about having talent in the NBA. Like, it's
but John Robinson and Mike Vrabel were good people and they had success. But you also see, like, does it come apart as quick? Is it as short-lived somewhere else? Okay. I don't know, But I think the Titans are more likely to phase into a good period like that and to phase out of it. I don't know that they're ever going to be an organization that, like, turns the corner and has long-term sustained success. Are they going to find a Tom Brady or a rock star player or GM or coach that is going to turn them into a team that for its entire existence has been known for middling, that turns into a team that wins 4 championships in 15 years? Like with everything else, I won't believe it until I see it. Yeah, but there's no reason to anticipate.
No, I mean, statistically it's improbable and unlikely, but it doesn't mean you can't find that right person, that right guy that does the job. All right, so I want to talk offensive line here for a second before we get to the scheme. And I think I got to be honest. I think it's kind of as I expected. I think I said all summer, this is going to be a team that is going to be these offensive linemen are going to be much better at run blocking to start the season than they are in pass pro. And that's absolutely what we saw. Latham and Skoronski combined for 10 pressures allowed on the left side, but they were the best 2 run blockers. Latham was the best run blocker according to the numbers by a pretty wide margin. 82.6. I believe this is PFF from Herndon. 69.1 for Skoronski. Cushenberry actually the worst run blocker of the group, but the best pass blocker of the group. The right side of the line only gave up 4 pressures. Certainly Dylan Radins looks like he'll be back. It looked like a bruised rib according to Callahan. He'll be back on Sunday against the Jets. But 2 pretty poor run blocking grades or average run blocking grades for the right side of the line. I think I'm not overreacting to the offensive line. I saw a lot of folks in your comments last night on the show kind of overreacting to the offensive line. Like, oh, same old Titans. It hasn't been fixed. It's never going to get fixed. This is even more of a one game, guys, because it's going to take time for Latham to develop. It's going to take time for Petit Frere. It's going to take time for them to work together. I think there was plenty there to be like, look, this team can run the football. They got 2 running backs. Those guys are going to be good on that side of the line. Cushenberry will get better. I'm not as – I still think there are reasons for – this group is going to be significantly better by the end of October and into November and December.
I agree with that, but they're going to face good enough pass rushers that they don't need to make Darrell Taylor look like an all-pro, which he isn't, right? And Latham, by Blake Bedingfield's count, 2 sacks, 5 hits in 38 pass blocking snaps, given help in protection 6 times. You can read that at paulkuharsky.com, where he really gets into Latham, Simmons, and Levis. So it's a disappointing start for Latham, who I expected better from. But we've got to see stuff like that coming. A story like his transition to the left side goes away when he's dominant against second teamers in 2 preseason games. And very good at camp, and he's working his tail off, obviously. And then, we sleep on it, and it shouldn't be a surprise that when it turns real and he's playing a full game, he gets figured out a little bit and has more difficulty. He's the one that's going to grow the most. I would think week 1 to week 2, he grows a lot. And Cushenberry talked today, and he said, he'll be out there tomorrow. He expects that Latham on his day off will be, and he's got a track record already of working super hard.
So what's interesting about the play that led to the strip sack, right, was it was a stunt. It wasn't just a lineup and beat you one-on-one physically. It was a mental mistake. It was he sort of stepped inside when he shouldn't have and let him go around the outside. And to me, that's the kind of stuff that is the last thing to come to an NFL player is complicated pass rushing schemes. Lining up against TJ Watt and trying to beat him one-on-one, all on your own, an island, Aiden Hutchinson, that you just have to be that good. You either are that good or you're not. And that's going to come, or we're going to find out about that. But the thing that beat him, and it's the thing that beat him, frankly, in the San Francisco game in the preseason, which is if you're not sharp mentally, this league will tear you up. And so that's where I thought that's a thing that they're going to iron. To me, that wasn't as real. Like if somebody's lining up and beating him physically, that's a problem. That's a concern. But I'm not sure that's going to happen a lot. And in the running game, they were very good. I thought they ran the ball very well on the left side of the line. And I think that part is going to be, he's going to be good at that, I think, from the beginning, and we'll see that move.
Well, they didn't run the ball in the second half at all with effect
that's true.
Anywhere. So we had 30 minutes of them running the ball with effect, and they went over 100 yards in the first half. After that, they just didn't move the ball any way, shape, or form in the second half.
Colt Anderson on special teams. Again, the more things change, the more I see Craig Aukerman walking on the sidelines. So that was brutal. That was just brutal. I don't know how, in a cruel twist of irony, you can allow your punter in his first game back as you already said earlier, getting his legs shredded. I don't know how you allow that to happen, especially in a moment in the game where you are in a position to continue the stranglehold and you just give them the points. It's just absolutely brutal mistake.
And that's Jack Gibbons losing, one-on-one. And you can't argue with Callahan where he says that's not some big scheme failure. That's a guy losing one-on-one. But, they have guys losing one-on-one there in a crucial situation that's given up 7 points. And Jack Gibbons is supposed to be super smart and not allow himself to get in positions to let something like that happen. Titans special teams have been bad, on the losing end of too many games, too many times. And, I had somebody raise an interesting point that I should have made a bigger deal of before it came up on the podcast last night. That, we talk a lot about the depth on this team. And certainly I've talked a lot about the last 5-6 guys on the roster. Now, some of those guys are down last night, but those last 2 tight ends are not 2 of the worst 5 or 6 guys on the roster. When you talk about that bad depth and you talk about the last 5-6 guys on the roster not being a big deal, despite the fact a lot of people think they're better than they are because we talk about them so much because their spots are up for debate late in camp and right there before the season starts. Those are the guys who are playing special teams. And so when your depth is bad, your special teams are filled with guys who are not as good as other people's good depth. And I think that's in evidence when you're letting a 66-yard kickoff return come back. I think that's in evidence when you're giving up a punt block like that. And so that's shining through. But certainly, I don't know, a lot of people were saying, well, giving too much blame to Craig Aukerman because here things extend. Callahan said that, I don't see any carryover. Yeah. This is a problem of its own. I would agree. Craig Aukerman could be bad and lose his job during last season for it. And Colt Anderson could be off to a bad start coaching these guys. And both of them could have had bad players operating.
All things can be true. Yeah. But I understand the frustration of fans saying this was a thing before.
I get it right.
Still a thing now. Yeah, no, I agree. All right, I want to talk scheme then, because we can talk both sides of the ball, but obviously we'll start on the offense because the defense, I think, did a pretty good job. And obviously, this quick, short passing game, the running game, there was one really, really good drive where everything felt in rhythm, felt in sync, 14 plays, I think, right down the field. Pollard ends up scoring a couple. Maybe there was another pretty solid drive in there as well. But even from the beginning, though, you said this earlier, like it didn't feel like Callahan was in his bag very much at all. And I don't know if that's a function of the Bears being good on defense, a function of Levis and the offensive line and the young players and the newness all playing together for the first time. If it's a function of Levis's decision-making and accuracy being a problem, processing, or if it's sort of all of the above. How much of the issues and frankly the Bears adjustments and the Titans lack of adjustments, how much is all of that on Callahan, the scheme and play caller versus game circumstances, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of that, but it's interesting. I mean, Callahan said, last night the Bears came out and they rushed more on first and second down than they had before. And that presented some problems for us. Not that we didn't expect it. So mandatory coach speak, we weren't surprised. That was good that he said he was surprised today by some of the regression. And he can say he's surprised by some things early. That's okay.
I was
that's
surprised.
Reasonable.
You were surprised.
I was surprised that he said he was surprised, which I think is fine for him to say about what he said it about. Okay, but this is another remnant of Todd Downing and Tim Kelly. The opponent adjusts, and the Titans don't adjust well to the adjustment. Cushenberry again said today, they changed things, but it wasn't a big deal. Well, you're telling us it's not a big deal. Meanwhile, it's super effective. And whatever the Bears did changed the game. And whatever the Titans did in reaction to what the Bears didn't offset the Bears' change whatsoever. Huge win. I know Joe Rexrode, I was making fun of him this morning. He says, halftime adjustments are overrated. You're having orange slices or whatever, and the adjustments go on throughout. Well, that's fine. The Bears' orange slices were much, much more effective than the Titans' orange slices. And, that goes right in line with the other problems that the Titans had that were similar to their problems over the last 3 years. And offensively, outside of Arthur Smith's great stretch with the Titans, this inability to adjust or evolve as a game goes along. And I expect a lot more from Callahan as the season goes on, but they did not do a good job with that. That's partly young, inexperienced element of the offensive line. It's Levis failing to he was already struggling, and then things change and he's got something new to struggle with. But the disappointment all around in that second half. I mean, if you're going to get shut out, and that's another, it didn't feel like they took their foot off the gas because, like you said, the gas wasn't all that impressive in the first half, but it was productive. They held the ball, they drove twice, and none of those things were happening in the second half.
Well, and I think Levis's longest completion of the day came on the final drive, that throw to Ridley. I think it was a 22-yard pass.
He had an earlier 22 to Ridley on one.
Okay, that was the one over the middle, and Pollard had the 26-yard run. So you can point to, outside of that one throw, which I believe was longer than every single drive the Titans had since going up 17-0. The longest drive they had was 15 yards after being up 17-0. So that 22-yard pass on the final possession before the interception, which honestly the interception kind of is what it is. You're trying to make plays. I'm not faulting him in a huge way for that. Kind of like the interception against the Pittsburgh Steelers last year at the end of the game. You're in a position where you got to force a throw. It kind of is what it is. But ultimately, the best two drives and the biggest plays and the most production we saw was in the first half. And then if you look at the Bears offense, while they were not good on offense, they did not do a whole lot. Caleb Williams looked inaccurate, looked flustered, and looked like a rookie quarterback starting in his first game. Their longest two plays from scrimmage came on one of the most important drives at the end, where they had a 14-yard. They started running the ball to the edge, which was an adjustment that they made. And you saw the DJ Moore jet sweep. You saw the DeAndre Swift hurdle play. Those are the two longest plays for the Bears. Caleb Williams had a scramble for a first down, I believe on 3rd and 10. All their best plays came in the second half because they were adapting to some degree, and it feels like the Titans didn't. So I know that's a broken record, but I don't know how much the scheme is to be blamed here versus play calling. It's hard to decide between the two, honestly.
Well, they're one and the same, really. I mean, the plays are called to emphasize the scheme and what they want to be and who they want to be and who they want to emphasize. Also, I think 8 or 9 of the passes went to wide receivers. Hopkins 17 snaps were kind of questionable. We didn't get to go there with Callahan today. That was my one last question that I wasn't able to get to. But they want to build him up, which seems fine. But it wasn't very threatening with all of that. Got one catch there. maybe he affects the coverage in a way that somebody else wouldn't. Burks was completely ineffective. I would have gone maybe with some more NWI. That's the first time I've said that in quite some time. But or even Jackson to get a shiftier, speedier element out there, because the Titans, even against zone, weren't. I talked, and I think we talked last week, but I did it on my pod last week, that they need to break tackles. If they're going to do this short stuff, then a guy needs to break a tackle and get some. They break any tackles yesterday? Pollard might have broken a couple of tackles, and he was the offensive MVP of that game. Outside of that, nobody shed anybody. Nobody made anybody miss. The Bears got people to the ground very efficiently.
It is a very, like, I just, the image in my head outside of the big bad mistakes is sort of like, all right, there's a 3-yard completion and an immediate tackle. Like that's sort of what the game felt like for the Titans offense. And I know Callahan said he wants a better split, I guess, in terms of Spears and Pollard. I know you wanted to talk about this. Spears is a guy that does break tackles, but to your point, Pollard is the MVP of the game. Like you can't, do you go away from the hot hand to just create balance for the sake of creating balance?
No, I mean, they've said hot hand, and there may well be some games where Spears is the hot hand, and I wouldn't go away from him either. But Pollard had a good first half, and there was nothing indicating that Spears caught a bunch of passes. He didn't do anything with them. Let me see real quickly what it was, but he wasn't impressive in any fashion in this game. It just wasn't his day. Spears, 4 targets, 4 catches, 11 yards. I don't need more of that. I need less of that. Spears, 4 carries, 21 yards. So he had 5.3 as opposed to Pollard's 5.1. But Pollard had 16 for 82 and the 26-yard touchdown. I was fine with what Pollard was doing. They need to find a way to get him back on track in the second half. But like you said, the way that Callahan spoke today was like, I regret not having gotten Spears more. Of the things he needs to kind of regret about his approach on Sunday in Chicago, I don't think that's one of them.
What's interesting is there's no way to prove this, but to your point, you were going to ask about Hopkins. I did think that throw to Hopkins is the one that felt the most comfortable for Will Levis. And he was such a security blanket for him last year. If we're talking about what's real and what's not, I think the scheme is going to be fine. I think I saw enough in camp to think, all right, this is a pretty sound scheme. We'll see what happens. I still think Levis has to get all that stuff out of his system and make better decisions. I think the offensive line is going to get better in pass pro and was pretty solid in the running game. But when you look at Hopkins and becoming more available in a bigger part of the offense, you've got to believe that does help Levis find some comfort knowing that he's got his safety valve out there whenever he wants to, and Callahan can scheme around that.
Hopkins is the number one guy for sure, and I don't know that there's an established second guy that he's that comfortable with, right? I think it's established that he doesn't have a comfort level with Ridley, and I was saying, it wasn't Vrabel-esque, the level to which that question was put down during the preseason, but we were told don't worry. They'll get it going. Ridley really said that. Don't worry, we'll be fine in the regular season. And look, it was 3rd and 15, the deep one that Levis overthrew. But Ridley was open.
Wide open.
He had his guy beat. So that's a touchdown on 3rd and 15. Yep. You've got to make that connection. And then the one on the right side, a couple plays before the official game-ending interception, Callahan said today, Ridley's supposed to have his eyes back to the quarterback at 10 yards and stop to take a back shoulder catch, and he kept going. So that's Ridley not running the right thing. Well, yeah. Ridley's got to run the damn right thing. He's $50 million guaranteed guy. And the fan base was very forgiving of this stuff in the preseason when some of us were making an issue out of it. I was expressing concern, and they were saying, the guy, against Seattle, he said, I didn't really run that out. And I was saying, what the hell is he not running it out for against Seattle? These are the 2 biggest practice days of camp. The connection is not established by any means.
No, I agree. I do think, though, to your point about Ackerman and Anderson, where 2 things can be true, I think you can say, look, it's not quite there yet with Ridley. They got to work on that, and some of that's on Ridley. I do think that when you beat your man off the line on a clear go route and you are 3 yards behind the guy, if Jamison Williams caught one of those yesterday from Jared Goff. Deshaun Watson's catching all kind of hell right now on Twitter because of the ball he threw way out of bounds on a go route to Amari Cooper. Like, Levis's pass wasn't any different than Deshaun Watson's. I don't see that clip making the rounds all over Twitter right now, but it was terrible. And I think somebody asked you last night, and somebody's already asked today. Like, that's Levis, not his technique. Just starts to fade a little bit when he gets pressure. And this goes back, not to go back to Levis and accuracy and decision making, but like, you got to stay sharp in those moments where your footwork is sharp and your decision making is sharp and you're letting the ball go on time, and everything felt like a beat slow and the decisions were a beat wrong. And Ridley's wide open. So if they complete that pass, and Ridley has, I think he had 4 for 50. So if he catches that and it's like, 5 for 92 and a touchdown, we're having a very different conversation about Calvin Ridley and maybe a victory, to be honest with you.
And that's his thing. I don't disagree with you about the mechanics and all of that, but we've seen him make throws like that off his back foot, strictly with his arm and his wrist. So yes, get all the mechanics right and be technically sound and all of that. But what happened to the guy? Yeah. And again, one game, one throw, all of that. But what happened to the guy that has hit that throw with people bearing down on him when he can't get the mechanics right, and he's just flicking it and landing it there with the right arc and all of that stuff? Somehow the guy who does that is not doing it with Ridley. This particular one we're talking about was not on Ridley. Right. But it's been a 50-50 split. I think actually a little bit more on Ridley overall, the lack of sync, than on Levis. But, at 6% of the season every Sunday, and 6% of the season just got lost. Like you said, well, if they make this one play, that could have changed things. Yeah. There are a lot of one plays that could have changed things. And we know the number one is, don't underhand an interception to the sideline when you're trying to throw the ball out of bounds.
He was just off on almost everything yesterday. It's just that Levis was. The scheme, I think, was okay. So we'll see. Tyler says not much play action yesterday. I've not seen the numbers. I know they were out of shotgun a lot. I have not seen the numbers on the play action. I don't know if you have that in front of you or not.
Well, look, Callahan said the same thing that we heard from Vrabel a lot. When things are not working, in the second half, nothing was working. Callahan said they're sitting back, taking away a play action deep shot. And, there's not opportunity for that. And then penalties come and you're in 2nd and 15. It sounded just like Braden.
Oh, that's another thing
when we're off schedule and when we're behind the sticks, Levis sounded just like Tannen. When we're behind the sticks, that stuff it can't work. We can't make it work.
Yeah, that's another part of the offensive line conversation we've not had is the offensive line penalties, putting them back behind the sticks. So that's another element that they should be able to work through. All right, defensively, let's get there because we'll end kind of here on a semi-decent note until PK, you decide to poo-poo all of this. Sinkers Beverages, of course, on the east side. Make sure you follow them on Twitter, on Instagram, on all the socials. They have all kinds of really great specials. They've got like wine, 4-pack wine specials all the time. They do tastings on Fridays a lot. So if you pop in there on a Friday before your weekend, they'll have, tequila set up there or bourbon. I think I tried a banana bourbon the other day when I went in there, and surprisingly good. I was expecting it to be I was going to be very disappointed, but it was pretty solid. So they're always kind of giving you new stuff to try and pointing out some good stuff for you to take home the weekend. Great, huge walk-in beer fridge, all kinds of local breweries in there. So make sure you go check out Sinkers Beverages, sign up for the in-crowd, and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Look, T'Vondre Sweat got a lot of reviews, positive reviews from the coaching staff. And let's start there because, look, Chicago, 11 first downs, 53 plays, 148 yards. That's 2.8 plays yards per play, 2 of 13 on third down, and did not score an offensive touchdown. We can say that this was Caleb Williams, and he didn't look good, and this was his first game, and a lot of new pieces and all this stuff, and that's all important context. But at the end of the day, that performance wins you a game more times than not from a defense. And T'Vondre Sweat and Simmons feel like the starting point on this conversation.
Defense played well. I don't think Simmons did a great deal, but I think maybe sometimes when one of them does well, the other one's not going to do well because that means he's drawing more attention up there. And in the press room conversation today, I was mentioning it, and people were pointing out on Landry's sack, I think that Simmons really had three offensive people on him. Look, it is a very sound defensive effort. No takeaways, though, which, when you're giving the ball away, you need to be taking the ball away. And a lot of people mentioned that Simmons Diggs, Key, Awuzie. But I have trouble celebrating a good defensive effort when it comes in the middle of all that stuff. So yeah, take your flowers, boys, but they shouldn't taste very good because it comes in the middle of all of that stuff.
I thought Roger McCreary played a pretty good game. I thought to have Snead and Awuzie out there.
Snead was good, but he did get beat on the fourth down. That surprised me. It was a short throw. It's tough to defend, but.
Was that the Keenan Allen like inside out route there?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to lose those to a player like Keenan Allen every now and then. But again, the fact that Awuzie and Allen were out and Snead were out there for most of the game, it sort of does belie a lot of the concerns that the fans have. Not necessarily you or me, but like the fans had a lot of concerns. And hey, we haven't seen these guys. When is he going to play? And fair questions, but they were both out there, both playing pretty good football.
And no huge communication flaws
Nope.
from the secondary. Now, we'll see it against a much headier and savvy and experienced quarterback next week.
I thought one of the names that I would point to, Quandre Diggs did not have a great game. I don't think he was bad, but he kind of made some mistakes on those last two plays that ended up picking up long first downs. He's not a young spring chicken anymore, and so I think Diggs has got some ground to make up. But otherwise, I thought the defense played pretty well and not a problem really. How much of the scheme you see a lot of Jannard Wilson's fingerprints all over it?
Yeah, probably not as much as we're going to see because Caleb Williams was so bad, and certainly the Titans were helping him be bad. But I don't know how many defenses he was going to be great against. He was making bad throws like Levis was making bad throws and missing people and not making great decisions. So I think it was a good job by the Titans against what they were facing. But they're going to face a lot more challenging offenses than that one. So as opposed to the Titans offense, which went against a pretty good defense, Titans defense had a pretty nice ramp up start there with the quarterback who I think Rexwood said the same thing today, but I have to steal his line. I picked the Titans not to go to the playoffs, and yes, just one game, but I feel pretty good about that. I picked the Bears to go to the playoffs, and I don't feel very good about that at all off of that sample.
I was going to ask you sort of about your week one process. Like, do you spend a lot of this week like revisiting your own thoughts? Do you spend a lot of this week trying to figuring out what's real and what's not? Week one absolutely can be a total myth. It's just one data point, et cetera, et cetera. Traditionally, you laid out a bunch of games that the Titans were good and in the season and bad in week one. How much have you what is your strategy for approaching week one games in general?
Yeah, just try not to put too much weight in it, which is the biggest thing you have to do is in conversation with people. My podcast will be was more reliant on interaction with voicemails and commenters yesterday. It will be again on Thursday. So in that circumstance or in conversations I have with people that I run into, you have to remind them of that. It's not so much the case talking with colleagues, but in planning what I'm doing going forward in terms of what I'm going to write and the like, I had a piece about pass rush moves that I was thinking I'd probably use this week. And now some of what happened out of that game can be applied to that for sure. And I think one or two other things that were already brewing, you kind of hope what happens in week one, some ingredient, them blowing a game doesn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
Some developments out of that game that do fit nicely into it. And then I have, one piece that I was working on that has absolutely nothing to do with results. How
many games do you need before you say something like, all right, JC Latham is going to be an excellent run blocker, but he's got a long way to go? Like, is it a third game? Is it a fourth game? When do you start making definitive statements about stuff?
I would say 3 or 4 before, I would express anything that feels trendy or starts to approach it. I wouldn't say a declaration, but say like, it feels like Latham is the real deal, or something approaching, like I think we're going to wind up with doubts about Levis, or I think they're going to be fine with Levis. I think some people are coming out of this saying they think, Pollard's going to wind up being the lead. I think it's far too early to say something like that. And I think you'd need a month to judge that it would be anything more than 60-40.
I think you need probably a third of a season for most positions, and I think you need more than that for quarterback. The number of times Mason Rudolph's name was mentioned on your show on Sunday is silly to me. But again,
and I think, people raised a fair point. Mason Rudolph would have won that game, but the Titans, the trade-off for Mason Rudolph winning that game, I mean, first off, you can't pull your starting quarterback to win that game with Mason Rudolph. You don't know he's about to throw an underhanded interception that loses you that game. If you did, then yeah, that'd be great. Hey, he's about to make a really stupid play. I'm going to replace him for this one play.
Mason Rudolph does not make the chig throw. He can't make the chig throw.
No, agree. But look, Mason Rudolph, we know his ceiling, right?
Yeah.
So his ceiling isn't good enough. Will Levis conceivably has a much higher ceiling. They're going to try to see if they could get to that ceiling or not. And the judgment isn't going to be as fast as people want it to be, nor should it be. The judgments are much faster than they've ever been in the NFL, much faster. So you should be satisfied with that, but they're not as fast as people want them to.
Stoney says, sign Ryan Tannehill. I am, as a Packers family member, I am hoping that they sign Ryan Tannehill.
You traded for Malik. You put your eggs in the Malik basket.
No.
Bring his ass here. Put him on that field, and let's see.
What's the
now? If Will Levis loses to Malik Willis,
oh god!
If this great defense that everybody's touting from the other day gives up points to Malik Willis, we'll be having a different conversation. Willis. People were saying yesterday, and my thing. They shouldn't have traded Malik Willis, as if Malik Willis is better than Will Levis, which is preposterous.
No, I'm having to tell all my family members about Andre Dillard and Malik Willis not being very good. I have to tell them all, like, guys, settle down.
Not being very good is very kind.
Yeah, right, exactly. What's fascinating is, like, I want to know what would break the internet more in Nashville. Is Ryan Tannehill starting the game in Nissan or Malik Willis? Because I think Malik also has this rare place in the. Ryan Tannehill is the bigger story. The more rational, bigger story. But I think Malik Willis coming back to start also breaks the internet in this town as well, especially if either of them
It'll be a fun week. I mean, maybe we'll get him on a conference call before the game, for which he can say nothing. I know they won't offer him up. Somebody's saying that if Jason McDonald said if Levis keeps taking hits like he did, then the decision will be made for them. He didn't take any vicious hit. I mean, He took a good hit on that when he dove foolishly. But I mean, if you think that was a beat up quarterback, you're not watching enough NFL games.
No, Matt Stafford last night was limping around. They ran a zone read option with him, and he hit it up there pretty well. Will Levis, I thought that was one of the few bright spots on the scheme. Yeah, very well designed play. All right, so here's what we got coming up Thursday morning. You got Music City Audible, of course, on their YouTube page. You got Hot Read Podcast on Tuesdays and Fridays. By the way, we announced today on Lower Broad Hockey and the Gold Standard that Adam Vingan is back in the fold now. So we've added Adam Vingan to the team as well, who's back covering the Nashville Predators, one of the best beat writers in that world. So
congrats on that. That's great.
Excited to have him. And then Nick Suss and I are doing a football show Thursday edition in the morning. So we'll do some morning stuff, and then you can catch PK in the 1 o'clock slot on Thursdays as well. So lots of stuff still planned for you guys from here on out the rest of the football season. So stay tuned. We got the Jets coming up in the home opener. How do we expect traffic to be on Sunday?
I don't really I haven't factored traffic into my drive in quite some time. Sometimes, I come kind of around and go towards Jefferson Street.
And you go real early, right? I mean, you're there a couple hours.
I don't go that early. I go to get there 2 hours before kick. And traffic hasn't really been a deal for me, outside of a rare primetime game or anything. But I expect it to be a breeze, quite frankly.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, this is a little humble brag. We had the mayor on our news show on Pod Bless Nashville. You can check that out today. We had an hour with him talking about transit and transportation. He says there's a lot of big plans for transportation for this football season at Nissan Stadium for the Titans. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Great.
That was his claim, PK. That was his claim. So
here's when they needed to make big plans for transportation in Nashville. 25, 30 years ago. So his predecessors are the ones that blew it. And there's only so many Band-Aids that he and his administration and administrations to come can apply. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
It's an investment vote in the future, Paul. Okay. If you want light rail for your kids in 30 years, you got to vote for sidewalks today. That's where we're at.
Are they digging up the highways to make room for light rail? Where's the light rail going to go? There's no place for it. Where are the parking lots at the end of light rail going to go?
Do you want an actual answer?
Yeah.
It's going to go where the dedicated bus lanes go. So they got to build dedicated bus lanes.
I don't know a single person that rides the bus. So it'll be better than that for a couple $2 billion.
A lot of people ride the bus. Millions of people actually ride the bus. So
I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying I don't know any of them.
Fair enough.
Do you?
Yes, I've ridden the bus. I've ridden the bus like 5 times. It's great. It's super easy. You can get
really alleviated Nashville's traffic problems. The 5 times that you rode the bus.
That is the number of times I go downtown across the river. I go to Nissan a lot, but the number of times I go into downtown is about 5 times. And I go to the Ryman for a show. I know you're a big music guy. I walk back to the depot and I take a $2 bus to 5 Points and I'm home. And it takes $2. It takes 5 minutes. It's great.
Here's what you need to do.
Very clean.
If you want to be a person in a city with great public transport, you need to move to a city with great public transport.
I don't disagree.
Chicago has it. New York.
I know.
Yeah. Paris, London.
London, but the underground in London is spectacular.
Unbelievable.
It's spectacular. All right, we'll get there. We'll get there in about 30 or 40 years, PK. All right, you'll be dead. It's fine. All right. But my daughters will be happy and independent. That's what matters. So, okay. Check out the Paul Kuharsky podcast. Of course, you can check out paulkuharsky.com over there. Nick and I will be back on Thursday. Paul's back on Thursday. You got Hot Read podcast. You got all kinds of stuff across the 440 Sports Network. So make sure you stay tuned to all of the shows, the YouTube page, thumbs up on the subscription button there. Share it on Facebook and Twitter. Get more people involved in this thing. And, of course, write us a review on the podcast app. If you do not, write us a 5-star review. You are a hater. Otherwise, have a great week, of course. And
don't block the box and look at the collared shirt on that guy, huh?
Look, this is branding.
That's good.
This is branding.
Keep it up.
Sinkers Beverages. I'm going to wear a Sinkers hat next time. Okay.
Fell right in line with the instructions.
Yeah, whatever. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Have a great night. PK's back on Thursday. We're back on Thursday. We'll talk to you guys then. Appreciate y'all.